Welcome back. My next guest is Dr. Angela Clack. She's the CEO of the Women's Empowerment Group International and a psychotherapist in New Jersey. And she's with us today to talk about the importance of learning to love yourself. Welcome, Dr. Clack.
Thank you.
Learning to love yourself. How easy is that? People think that it's not that easy, and oftentimes they don't know what to do to really feel good about themselves. There's lots of self-criticism. What do people need to do to give themselves a real good dose of self-love?
Well, you're absolutely right. It's not as easy as it sounds. A lot of people say, I really do love myself. But when they find themselves in very compromising positions, or they have failures in their life, or they're up against obstacles, their self-esteem begins to get challenged. And they start to come down on themselves. So there's a fear of being judged by others. And we also compare ourselves as women to some very tough standards in this society. So one of the things I tell women is learn to embrace your imperfections. You were designed originally, you are who you are. You just have to learn to love that person. And it's a journey. It's not something that happens overnight.
Right, it's a journey. And so oftentimes we get so many messages from very young, whether it's from family, from teachers, from the media, about, like you said, about we're not perfect, or we need to be better, or somebody else is better than we are. What do we need to do personally to kind of shield ourselves from those messages, or not pay attention to them and do, like what you said, embrace our imperfections as well as our wonderful parts?
Well, that's a really hard thing for women to do because we are bombarded with so many messages. So the key is to do the opposite. How do you surround yourself with positive messages, positive people? It may be joining a group, or seeing a therapist, or getting a business or personal coach. It may be reading books on self-help to uplift your self-esteem. But I go back to, this is a journey. It's about life experiences. I have to say, I don't know many women before the age of 40 who've learned to identify their true authentic self. So it's not something that comes when you're an adolescent. It takes some work to get to this place where you really learn to love yourself.
And you know, you're so right, because I remember interviewing some women later on in their lives, and when they're in their 20s, when they're in their 30s, they're still so critical. And then they get to exactly what you're talking about, some level of self-acceptance. You also talk about our emotional awareness, so that's a piece of loving ourselves. What do you mean by creating more of a sense of emotional awareness?
When I'm working with women, I find out that often they're not in touch and in tune with how they feel about things. So when you ask them how they feel, they'll say, well, I think this, I believe this. They give you thoughts, but I say, no, I want you to get in touch with how you feel. And that's a struggle. When I work with kids, they give me the 4 basic emotions: happy, sad, mad, and glad. Women, they're deeper than that. And there's, for some women, a sense of shame, depression, anxiety. It's deeper, and they're cut off somewhat from the head down.
But do you think it's because it's uncomfortable and they don't want to
Very.
look at those emotions?
It's very uncomfortable, and there's a fear if I get in touch with that, it's a loss of control.
And also, right, and if I get in touch with it, who knows what's going to happen? It's going to open up this watershed of all those uncomfortable feelings that I've been pressing and pushing down.
Yes. And how many of us want to be in a vulnerable position? Not many.
Although I think that being vulnerable is a real core strength.
And it's a necessary ingredient for self-love. You have to be vulnerable to the exposure of your weaknesses in order to fix them. But people are scared of vulnerabilities.
So how do we tell people it's okay to be vulnerable? It's okay to take a look at those uncomfortable parts of yourself, embrace them, love them, because like you said, it's a journey, and it's the road, the true path to really feeling good about who you are and what you're doing in the world.
It really is about educating women and opening up, I would say opening up the heart space to allow some people in, people that they trust, to have conversations about who they are. And my biggest message to women is, now you're at a place where others don't define you anymore. You get to define you. Because growing up, society defines us with messages. Our parents says, well, you're going to grow up and be a doctor or a lawyer. That may not be who you want to be. And so now it's time for you to learn to define who you are.
You know, Dr. Clark, that's so very important because, like you said, we get swayed by other people's views of ourselves. And at some point, we wake up and we decide, wait a minute, I've been living this life that doesn't feel like me.
Yes.
So I love what you said about getting in touch with that heart space because most people are uncomfortable living there.
Yes.
And what is one way that we can share right now with how we get in touch with that heart space?
Okay, so in the therapy world, and I want to say that it's becoming a bigger thing for people outside the therapy world, but
Right.
since that's my background, is the concept of mindfulness. And
Right.
it's really being in touch with living in the moment. Often I find women are living with regrets and they're kind of stuck in their past or they're anxious about their future. If you live more present and you're more focused, you'll live right and sit right where that heart space is.
So don't worry about what happened yesterday because it's over with. You're not going to
Can't
be able
do
to change
anything.
it. And don't project something onto the future because if you're staying in that wonderful space, like you say, that heart space, that living here now, life is so much better. Dr. Clark, you are wonderful and
Thank
you have
you.
such a resource of information, not just for women, but for children and families and couples. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you. Thank you for the
My
invitation.
pleasure. Just ahead, we'll look at a new documentary that's exposing the truth about how to truly become a successful woman and an entrepreneur when Power Your Life returns.